I was going to say
Now it's toggled on.
we hope you, the viewer, regardless of when you're watching this live or otherwise, hope you guys are having a very good day, very blessed day, wherever you're at in the world.
Absolutely. Hope everybody's doing well. Everybody's staying out of the cold. If you're in these northern states where I'm at, it's affected my travel, man. I've had to keep an eye on the weather report because I got to go over the mountains to get to each place. And so it's like, it may not be snowing where I'm at, but it may be like there's like an ice storm in the mountains. And I'm like, oh, this is crazy. So, I mean, I'm used to it. I'm from this part of the world. So that's just the way it goes. But we're now live on YouTube. That's the one thing I got to remember, man. I'm a bad producer. I got to remember when we do this from the playback rooms, I got to toggle on the YouTube stream as well from playback. But anyway, we're ready to go. I'm excited to dive into the 2025 NBA Rookie Ladder for more than one reason. People are coming around to this Stephon Castle guy, man. They're starting to catch on that he may actually be pretty good. They have the De'Aaron Fox trade that went down to add with Victor Wembanyama, Stephon Castle, and Chris Paul. And they're going to have a 2025 draft pick as well. So this team could end up being scary very fast. Two, that's right. Two 2025 draft picks. So this team could end up being very scary very fast. And this Stephon Castle guy, I saw someone on Twitter, Dusty, the reporter for the Spurs reporter on Twitter, he had put out there, people were saying this Stephon Castle guy can't shoot. You shouldn't draft him. All this stuff. But if you go back to our draft coverage, we were talking about he's the best player in that draft. And from the beginning said he was my favorite to be Rookie of the Year. But that's neither here nor there. Let's get into this 2025 NBA Rookie Ladder. I will edit it into the description later. And we're going to do this in reverse order. We're going to start at the bottom of the ladder. This is Steve Ashburner we haven't done this in a while, so that's who creates this ladder. And so we have at number 10, Isaiah Collier for the Utah Jazz. He's averaging 5.9 points per game, 2.8 rebounds per game, and 5.2 assists per game. And I remember when we were talking about what he was going to need to do to be successful in the NBA, he was going to have to lean into the facilitating more than he did in college. And it seems like that's what he's doing, and that's when he's found traction of staying on the floor in Utah. What are your thoughts of Isaiah Collier that you've seen so far this season?
I've watched a little bit of Collier lately, and he's looked legitimately good with his playmaking. They're giving him a lot of on-ball reps as they should at really this stage of the season because they're trying to see what they have in him.
Yes.
I think he's done I don't know what his turnovers are like lately, but he's done at least eye test wise, he's done a legitimately good job with his facilitating, with his playmaking. You can see he's a more willing passer than he was at USC. He's kind of initiating and kind of conducting that offense. Yeah, it's still not a good offense. It's still the Utah Jazz. They're one of the worst teams in the league. But just from him, I think he's come along further than I initially would have thought at this point of the season, if I'm being completely honest.
Yeah, for a 29th overall pick, in the past 2 weeks, if you look at the rookie ladder, Steve says he's been averaging 10.1 points per game, 4.3 rebounds per game, and almost 8 assists per game as a starter in the past 2 weeks, and has 3 double-doubles. For the 29th overall pick in a draft, you will take that, right?
Yeah, I'm just looking up since the new year, 10.2 points, 8.2 assists to only 3.1 turnovers, 44% shooting. Still not efficient from deep, but he's around 80% from the free throw line. So what? That's a quick math in my head. A little bit above a 2.5 assist to turnover ratio.
Right.
Again, still not efficient from deep. I'm going to see if I could. So what is he since mid-January? I know I'm doing this on the fly on basketball.
That's all right. It makes great radio content.
11.9 points, 8.9 assists, 3.5 turnovers, 45% shooting, 74% from the free throw line. Also averaging about 4 rebounds a game as well. Again, I think he's been a solid player over this, most recent stretch. And so I think he's well deserving of being in this top 10. There's one player that we can get to it at the end who didn't make this list that I'm surprised didn't make this list.
Yeah, we'll get to that at the end. We'll go with the honorable mentions. Did they get snubbed? Did they didn't? Did they not? But Collier, yeah, I mean, for the 29th overall pick, you can't ask for more than that in his rookie season. I still have concerns about his ability to finish in traffic and through contact. I mean, he's very physical, but he's not super explosive. And so I do have concerns about that. I have concerns about his three-point shooting percentage overall. But we'll see how that continues to progress through the rest of the season. Let's move on to number 9 on the rookie ladder. Formerly 8th on this ladder. The number 14th overall pick, Bub Carrington. He's in the last 15 games averaging 6 points per game, 3.2 assists per game, only shooting 30%. And the way Ashburner lists this is as rookie wall warning. And that's actually something a lot of people don't realize is that shooting percentages for rookies tend to dip, not because they're not good shooters, even if they're good shooters in college, but the sheer amount of wear and tear and conditioning is completely different from college.
Right.
And so when your legs start getting heavy, your shots start getting short, and Bub's a tough shot maker to begin with. Like his specialty was taking tough shots, not the easy ones. Yeah. So, but I've been pleased with his defense. I've been pleased with his playmaking. He's fit really well with the other young guys. They seem to have a great bond, all those young guys down in Washington. So I'm excited to see what happens with that team. What are your thoughts on Bub's play so far?
I will say in the 3 games since the deadline, 15.3 points, 5 assists, 4 rebounds. He's shooting efficiently, 56% from the floor, 48% from deep, albeit on or he's taking actually most of his attempts from deep. Excuse me, I was reading that wrong. 7 attempts. 7 of his 11 attempts have come from deep over that range on average.
Yeah.
I've liked Bub this entire season. Again, like he is to me a little bit of a streaky shooter, and again, that's part of the tough shot diet that he had. He wasn't someone in college, and we've talked about this before. He wasn't someone in college that was like going to get to the rim a whole lot. He pulled very prominent pull-up jump shooter was like his thing, and like you've seen that this year as well as a rookie. Like that's not something he's necessarily developed yet, and you have to live with the hot and the cold stretches that he'll have. But just in terms of what he can do as an all-around player is something that like I think there's a solid base
for sure
on both ends of the floor. And so I've liked what I've seen from him this season. Again, I know it's difficult to be a general manager sometimes when you're trying to trade away bad assets, but like I kind of wish they did trade Kyle Kuzma at the deadline. They were able to they got back Chris Middleton and Marcus Smart, which is a little bit funny. I don't know. I think I was talking this with someone last week. That may be good for him in the sense that like he can learn some tips and tricks from them. I don't know how much playing time those guys are going to get.
Right. You don't want to stunt the growth of the young guys to play.
Yeah, like I was worried that will stunt the growth, but like I think there is a world where it can help them to an extent. But I kind of wish they were also able to get off the Jordan Poole contract. I know finding a taker for that is way, way harder than I think we may realize. But I just wish like he was able to get a little bit more runway. But hey, he's been good since the deadline, so I'm not gonna knock it too much. He meaning Bub, not Jordan Poole.
Right. Well, Poole, we all know how I feel about Jordan Poole around here and his unserious approach to basketball.
Yeah. But like I just hope the addition of Chris plus Marcus, which is just a really weird thing. Like one of the funniest parts about that trade deadline was the graphic of the Middleton Smart. Like ESPN put out a graphic where it was like Washington's new duo, and it's Chris Middleton and Marcus Smart. And it's just like, this is so unbelievably weird. Like I don't like this at all.
Not at all.
It's not at all. A very funny graphic because it's the Washington Wizards, the worst team in the league. Like, but I hope I don't think they'll hinder his growth just from like a opportunity standpoint, but
Right.
I genuinely don't know. It's hard to trust Chris Middleton because he's two old man ankles at this stage of his career. Marcus
Oh man, he's
Smart has
hurt
dealt with
all the
injuries
time.
all year. Yeah, Marcus Smart's been injured practically all year, or at least each of his last 2 years with Memphis.
Right.
Um, but I think he can pick up some things from those guys. Like I think there is a world where like he's able to diversify his game a little bit in the future, just picking up tips and tricks as a playmaker, as a shot maker, even as a defender, because those two guys, at least in their heyday, were good defenders and they're smart defenders.
Yeah, it's always good to have a veteran to learn the tricks of the trade, not just on the court, but how to take care of your body and how to train.
Right.
So it'll be very good for those young guys in that regard. Like you said, I just hope they don't end up stunning their growth and playing too many minutes, which I don't anticipate that happening.
Yeah, I think they're at the stage of the season where like they've won like 9 games. I don't see a reason why they should be playing Chris Middleton 25 to 30 minutes a night, but
For sure. No, for sure. Yeah, it wouldn't make a lot of sense. Moving on to number 8 is a guy that we were advocating for heavily in the 2024 NBA draft, and that was Tristan da Silva for the Orlando Magic, up from the 18th spot. No, the 18th overall pick, and he fell down a spot from the 7th spot down to the 8th spot. He returns to the bench, says Ashburner, where he shoots 53% from the field, I'm guessing, because he doesn't designate, and 48.5% from three. Whereas when he was a starter, he was shooting about 40% from the field and 29.5% from three as a starter. So a little bit more comfortable in that role, playing against a little bit less of a quality of opponent coming off the bench, and just for a role where he can really thrive and take advantage of some mismatches. So it'll be good for him overall, and that'll be good for the Magic to have his scoring punch back off the bench. I've been really pleased with what I've saw with him anytime he's on the court, especially when he played the Miami Heat. He freaking absolutely was knocking down shots from all over the place. But he's another one of those guys that's a very good player. I think he's going to, have a long career in the NBA. And it was one of these deals where they're saying this is the worst draft class ever, and you get a quality scoring, functional size wing piece at the number 18th pick in the draft. What are your thoughts on one Tristan da Silva?
You know how I feel about da Silva. I love him. His shot at the beginning of the season, he wasn't very efficient.
Right.
And I think that's as the season's, he's been a little bit more consistent with that, albeit like, not very many shot attempts. He hasn't, outside of when Paulo was hurt and Francis was hurt, like he wasn't getting too much opportunity.
Right.
But like he's still like a contributing rotational piece that should be on this list, and I think it's well deserved on both ends.
Absolutely, it's well deserved, and I think he has so much upside. Even though he's a little bit of an older player, when it comes to the defensive end of the floor, there's a lot of meat on that bone. When it comes to the facilitating ability, because he played a big in college, even though he's more of a wing in the NBA. So I think in the short roll area, I think some secondary ball handling action, I think there's still more meat on that bone for him to grow into that role. Moving on the ladder to pick number 7 was a number 1 overall pick in the draft. Up 2 spots from the last ladder at number 9. He's now number 7. That's Zachary Risacher. He's averaging 11.3 points per game, 3.5 rebounds per game, 1.2 assists per game. Ashburner cites this stat where it says he's the youngest at 20 years old in the NBA history with 80-plus minutes, 64-plus points, and 0 turnovers in a 3-game span. Now, that's a really specific and odd stat. But what I think he's trying to say that he's playing well. He's fitting in, not turning the ball over, sticking with the game plan, and he's starting to convert at a higher percentage. So I'll let you wax a little poetic about him, and I'm going to look up some stats on Risacher because I'm very interested myself to see what he's actually shooting these days.
I think we've talked about this a little bit before on previous rookie ladders. I think he's still he's becoming more comfortable, like on the floor. He is getting plenty of run. But this most recent deadline, they acquired Niang and LeVert.
Right.
And you saw, I think it was last night when it was either last night or the night before, they actually played against Orlando, and he only played like 18 minutes.
Right.
And that's even with Jalen Johnson, being out for the season with an injury. And so I'm interested to see if like that kind of trend continues, because I want to say before he was getting around 25 a night, or at least like in the ballpark of that.
Right.
But with him specifically, like, him putting the ball on the deck, I think he's been a little bit more comfortable. The shooting, it's inconsistent, but I'm glad that he's at least like getting him up, and he's confident in his shot. Like, I think that's what they want him to do.
For sure.
And so that part of it I like. In addition to like, he is a big body defensively, like not big in like size, like big in length.
So he's a long linear athlete.
Yeah, he covers up space in that area, and I think with Johnson being out, I mean, you could argue Johnson was maybe their best player this season. I know Trae Young.
Oh, he was phenomenal.
But Johnson was phenomenal. And I think obviously Risa Shea is nowhere even close to being the player that Johnson can be, or Johnson is. But like, I want him to get a little bit more run. Just because I think for them it's a little bit of a lost season, even with Niang and LeVert there. I want to see them lean into Risa Shea just a little bit more. And he's playing it next to, a great playmaker, one of the best in the NBA, the guy who leads the league in assists, and Trae Young. Like, I feel like they're like Trae and Dyson and whomever can set up Risa Shea plenty. And so I want to see them lean into that a little bit more and not have some of the older guys take away playing time from him respectfully, just because, again, like,
right,
they might be in the playing race. They might be, a couple games below 500. They might not be much. They may not be far away from like the 6th seed, but I don't think with the current state of their roster, they're getting there anyways. And so again, selfishly, I want to see them lean into Risa Shea just a little bit more than they have post deadline.
Well, here's the thing about Risa Shea. Like, his effective field goal percentage is like 49%, for almost 50%. He's shooting 51% from two. Yeah. Right? It's good. But he's only shooting from three 31% from three. He's not turning a ball over, which is good. He's giving you the rebounding. There's more facilitating he could be doing. But what I want to point out, they've won 4 of their last 5 games. Right, Atlanta? They've won 4 of their last 5. His 3-point percentage against Orlando was 50% from 3, 1 of 2. His 3-point percentage against Washington was 66%, 2 of 3. And then he had an off night where he shot 1 for 4 from 3, and then he was 0 for 3, and then before that, 2 for 6. So he's streaky. Yeah. So like a lot of young guys, he needs to really hone in on his consistency, focus on his form. But my point is, there's a lot of hope for the future for his shooting potential, for it to continue to get better, and for him to continue to thrive in the system. And he's contributing to winning. Even though they've lost quite a bit this season, he is still in these last 5 games been able to contribute to wins, which is good. I'm also more pleasantly surprised whenever you look at his advanced stats. His box plus minus isn't awful. It's not great, but it's also not awful. And that was one of the knocks coming out of the draft. Like, how could he defend at this level? He's going to have the foot speed to be able to do it. He's going to have the strength to be able to play, physical brand of basketball. And he is finishing better than people realize. And like you said, his handle's been better than people realized also. So moving on the rookie ladder, we have number 6, the second overall pick in the draft. He is down 3 spots from number 3 in the previous iteration, and that is one Alex Sarr. The big man for the Washington Wizards. He's got a nice touch around the rim, can handle a little bit, can shoot the 3 ball. And I think he's mainly fell on the ladder because he's been injured.
Yeah,
hasn't played since 27.
Yeah.
But what are your thoughts on his game from what you've seen so far this year?
I mean, again, it's to say like he's been good defensively. Him on the glass hasn't been always the best. I think there's a lot of inconsistency. Um,
Right.
I don't. I mean, his shooting percentages haven't been great. His
Right.
finishing hasn't been great, but I think there's hope there.
I do. I think the numbers are actually very deceiving on him because he started off the season so poorly.
Yeah,
So I mean, he had a really, really tough hole to climb out of. And whenever he's went up against like Dallas or Phoenix recently, the Clippers, the Lakers, he's really struggled against those better teams, the teams that have a lot more talent, and that just speaks to his youth. He's such a young, raw prospect. I just think it's going to take some time for it to come together because they ask him to do a lot for the Wizards. There's no veteran that's like, I'm going to take pressure off you. They run a very fast paced, quick decision offense. And even with those things, he's still averaging 11 and a half points per game. He's blocking shots. He's got averages, a block and a half per game. And surprisingly, he's facilitating. He averages 2.5 assists per game, 6.6 rebounds. And his percentages, I think, are going to get better as time goes on. I just think if you box score watch and you look at his numbers, it doesn't tell the whole story of how well he's played. Stephen Fine says, I would like Alex Sarr to win Rookie of the Year. I like Alex Sarr, Stephen. I just don't think he's going to win Rookie of the Year. I think it's going to be Stephon Castle. I've said that before the draft. I've said that during my draft prep. I thought he was the best player in the 2024 NBA draft. So we'll continue to discuss that. Leave any other thoughts you have in the comments below, like Steven. We really appreciate you guys joining us on this journey of going back through the rookie ladder. And we're going to talk some college prospects after, so stick around for the second half of the show as well. Number 5 is a guy that we know very well around here because we're contributors to the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Find us there. Find us on playback.tv /5RSN as well as playback.tv /Hoops Profile. That is one Kel'el Ware. He's up from the 6th spot. He's moved up a spot. 15th pick overall in the draft. He's now a starter. A lot of people have been clamoring for that. I think he's been very wildly inconsistent. But I think he also has a skill set and he has just phenomenal touch around the basket that you can't teach. I think his length and athleticism, again, is something that you can't teach. And I think as these young guys start to get, more polished and he gets into an NBA weight room, NBA conditioning and shape, I think we'll then be able to see what kind of ceiling he's going to have. Because right now, on a nightly basis, when he plays against stronger players, he just gets bullied inside. He's just not strong enough. He doesn't really have he doesn't have the defensive basketball IQ to stay down on pump fakes and to stay square. So whenever, one thing the teams do a lot to Kel'el Ware is they put him in a pick and roll and they do a lot of ball fakes. Because he falls for eye candy like crazy. You ball fake this way, you ball fake a layup, he gets off his feet. But he also has been really good at times at breaking up lobs, blocking shots, just being tall. What are your thoughts on Kel'el Ware for the Miami Heat?
At the start of him getting consistent playing time, the rebounding specifically was bad.
Right.
Like he was getting some numbers, but just like the positioning, the box outs, everything that was bad. I think it's been a little bit more consistent lately, and I think it's been better. One thing that I tweeted this earlier today. I was rewatching some of the tape from Boston yesterday, and one thing that they were doing, and one thing that teams have been doing, is like, especially when he's on like a deeper drop, him in space in drop, like his positioning, he's typically out of position, or not typically out of position, but like he gets out of position. He doesn't have quite the foot speed to recover. And that's something that I think teams over time are going to pick up on. And that's something that he will need to work on because, like, there are some reps that are good, but there's other
Yeah,
reps that like he gets beat and he's not good enough nor fast enough to recover. And that's an easy way. Again, we've talked about the foul trouble with him. That's an easy way to pick up fouls. And so that's
absolutely.
something that I think was like an issue, or that has been an issue, and that's something that will need to be corrected over time. Offensively, I want to see him again. This is like some stuff that, like, again, I don't expect it to be necessarily immediate, but something that I will want to see over time. Him develop a
Right.
little bit of a post game, him being a little bit more non one dimensional, like whether it comes to like, the vertical spacing or whatnot. Like I've said before, I want them to maximize that vertical spacing as much as possible. But
Yes.
with, again, now that we're past the deadline, now that we know who's on the roster with Davion, with Wiggins, with Anderson. Like I want to see him develop a little bit more of a post game, diversify his game just a little bit more. He had a couple post ups yesterday, but like he hasn't been someone who has posted up really at all as a rookie. Where
No,
it's
and it's
matches or anything.
the lack of strength and the footwork. He doesn't
Right.
have the footwork or the strength to pull it off right now.
Yeah.
And if you look over the last 5 games, he's got 3 games where he shot below 33% from the field.
Yeah.
And
He
that's
was
tough for
four
a
of 12
7-footer.
yesterday.
He
Yeah.
was 4 of 12 yesterday. He was 4 of 12 against Brooklyn. He was 0 for 3 against Phoenix. The one good thing he has been doing in this stretch, though, is basketball.
Yeah.
Did my phone cut off there? I guess I didn't make enough eye contact. But
Don't
I'll
worry,
get
I
it back.
struggle with that too.
Making eye contact?
Yes.
That's right, because you're an introvert. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. I am, but
I used to be. We talked about that. Did we talk about that off air? I used to be, but my corporate job, I worked myself through that because that was the only way to be successful. But yeah, let's talk about. Oh, good. The people can still see me. I just can't see myself. You can see me, right?
you're frozen on my screen. I can hear you, but you're frozen. It's
All
fine.
right. Well, that's fun.
That's
We'll
fine.
just keep going. No one cares if they can see my face anyway. But Ware is shooting 37% for 3 on the year. He struggled lately with it because it's low volume. I mean, 1.9 attempts per game. It's not super high volume. But the rebounding is encouraging. It is definitely encouraging because that's an effort thing. I am concerned about the lack of free throws that he generates. And that goes back again to the lack of physicality. Everything's finesse right now.
Yeah.
In the last 5 games, he shot 2 free throws. That you need more than that.
And that's
But
a
let's
team
move
wide
on.
thing too. Like in the post Jimmy era, this team is going to have to be better at getting to the free throw line collectively,
Right.
and he's part of that.
Right. Absolutely, he is. I couldn't agree with you more. I'm sitting here trying to fix my camera, but we are going to move on. The only person it's bothering is me. Number 4, down or up a spot from the 5th spot is one Yves Missi, 21st overall pick in the draft. A guy I thought Miami should have drafted over Ware. We've said that a million times. But Ware turned out to be a good player. He's been better than I thought in the motor department. Overall, we'll see how he continues to go. Misi's usage has been down. I surmise this has been due to them trying to save him a little bit. Because to me, it looks like he's wearing down, hitting that rookie wall. Guy that was only 19 years old, only played basketball for like 4 or 5 years. Great vertical spacer, chase down blocks, motors for days, sets good screens. Actually has surprisingly good footwork in the low post for a guy that hasn't been playing so long. That goes to his soccer background. What have your thoughts been on Yves Missi?
I also think part of it too is Zion being back. And I
Yeah.
think, like, yeah, DeJounte's out for the season. I think reports surfaced either today or yesterday that Herb Jones may be out for the season. So, like, this has been a team, we've said this before, they've been just so beat up with injuries. It's crazy.
Right.
And so there was a point in time in the middle of the season where like Misi really had to step up just because there was no one else.
There was literally no one, right?
And so like Zion being back, I was looking up some lineup data with he and Zion on the floor, and it hasn't been good. Like they've been pretty porous defensively. They have a -6 net rating in nearly 230 minutes.
Right.
115 offensive rating, which is I think would be like middle of the pack around the league, but their defense hasn't been good. Obviously, with Zion and Misi together, it compromises the spacing just a little bit. Like you have to, because considering Zion and Misi are both non-shooters, and so I think that hasn't necessarily helped matters at all. In addition, not having Herb Jones. I mean, Trey Murphy's been balling. Jose's had moments. Zion's obviously, had moments. Jordan Hawkins, when he's been available and healthy, I know he's dealt with injury too, has had moments.
He's one of my most disappointing players from that 2023 NBA draft, Jordan Hawkins. I mean, he came back this season without any advancement in his game. He's the exact same player he was as a rookie.
And he's shooting worse from three.
Because they game plan for it now. He didn't add anything to his bag. They just run him off the three-point line because they know he's not effective at doing anything else. But to me, see, in your point of him playing with Zion, because they occupy a lot of the same spaces, you just can't play them that much together. It just makes your offense so clunky. I mean, in the last 5 games, Misi is still giving you the hustle. 8 rebounds, 13 rebounds, 6, 6, and 13 over the last 5 games. So he's still hustling, but you can see the shot attempts are down, the percentages are down, because they just occupy too much of the same spaces. But overall, I'm really pleased with him as a prospect. Him being 5th on the ladder, or 4th on the ladder, I could see that. If he keeps not playing well, though, I could see Kello Ware overtaking him. If Ware can figure out some of the consistency stuff, be a little bit more physical, and get to that jump hook a little bit more. But at number 3, somebody that we talked about ad nauseum before the draft, the dinosaur himself for the Memphis Grizzlies. He's up from the 4th spot, Zach Edey. Ashburner says Edey didn't even crack the nominees list for the West top rookies. Collier, Dunn, Wells did that after putting up modest numbers in January, but he's off to a raising start in February. So, what are your thoughts on one Zach Edey?
He's been very good lately. He's been very productive. I think for the most part, from what I've seen from him lately, I haven't seen too much, but what I have, he just stayed out of foul trouble. And he's just been that like enormous screen setting, play finishing, rebounding presence in the lane. And that's, I mean, when you have Jaw, when you have Bane, like when you have Kennard, some of these other guys, like that's exactly what you want to see from him. And so like, I know he hasn't been their best rookie this year, and I know we're going to talk about their second rookie in just a little bit, but like he's been at least the last probably 6 or 7 games or so, like he's been legitimately good. And I think it's definitely a step in the right direction from, I mean, I know he was hurt a little bit, but it's obviously a step in the right direction from what it was earlier in the season when he was much more inconsistent.
No, absolutely. And he's actually been shooting surprisingly well on terribly low volume from 3. Shooting 35, 36% from the 3-point line. Never would have guessed that coming out of college. Even at the Combine, I didn't think it would translate. I still don't think overall it's going to translate. He's never going to be a stretch big. But he dominates the paint whenever he does get the ball. I mean, even though he's been better at not fouling as much, he still averages 3 fouls a game. And he's only playing 21 minutes per game. Well, this is what I was going to say. Over the last 5, he's only had 2 games where he's over 25 minutes. Everything else has been under 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So if you try to play him more than that, he's just going to foul out. He still has trouble fouling. He just doesn't have the foot speed and the body position to keep up with the pace of today's NBA.
Yeah.
And that's always going to be a struggle for him, in my opinion. So I like what I've seen from him when you can. I just don't think overall he's going to be better than Misi or Ware in the long run because of that. They're both more fluid athletes. They're both more nimble, and you're able to fit into today's game a little bit more. Now, Could he surprise me and keep this up and continue to grow? Maybe. I just don't see it. As you mentioned, there is somebody else on this ladder who surpassed him on his own team, and that's one Jalen Wells. Somebody Miami Heat fans were hoping to get in a Jimmy Butler trade. That talk got dissipated very quickly. 39. You talk about value in the draft. 39th overall, Jalen Wells, outstanding player, 11.4 points per game, 3.2 rebounds per game, 1.7 assists per game. Ashburner writes, Wells continues to be joined at the hip with fellow rookie and Grizzlies teammate Zach Edey. Pair were drafted together in the Rising Stars competition. He leads in total points, field goals, and three-pointers made among rookies. Outstanding. What do you think of Jalen Wells?
I know recently his shot has tailed off a little bit. I know that's been a little bit of an inconsistency this year, but I think defensively, like, he's been so much fun to watch. Like, every night he's consistent. When he's on the floor, he's consistently picking up like one of the opposing team's best ball handlers or shot creators or whatever, and like he's holding his own. And that's something like that they've put on his plate, and I think he's done a legitimately good job. Like there's like real tangible value for what he's provided, even when he's not making shots all the time.
Right.
And so that's something that I've been, genuinely impressed with. And I'm just looking at it over his last few games, 6 games, 44% from the floor, only shooting 16% from deep. I know he was on a little bit of a heater before then, and then 2.7 rebounds, 1.8 assists, 5.5 points in 22 minutes. Again, the counting numbers aren't great, but I think his overall impact when he's been on the floor like supersedes that because of what he's been able to do defensively at this point of the season.
And 39th overall pick, playing 52 games for you already, and you're not a losing team.
Right.
That speaks volumes to what he's been able to accomplish and to be able to crack that rotation there in Memphis. So I do think he's hitting a little bit of that rookie wall. The All-Star break will be good for him. It'll be good for a lot of these young guys just to try to get their legs back underneath them. Number 1 on the rookie ladder is somebody that I talked about ad nauseum during the draft. It is my guy, Stephon Castle, San Antonio Spurs. I had people try to tell me he couldn't shoot well enough. He's not really a point guard. This draft class is so bad, there's no way the Spurs would be insistent on keeping him. And wouldn't you know it, some of the sticking points in the reports that came out is that Stephon Castle was a sticking point holding up the De'Aaron Fox trade. And until Sacramento realized that, they weren't going to trade De'Aaron Fox to the Spurs. As soon as they realized that Stephon Castle wasn't going to be a person they could get, trade went through like that. Just to read Ashburner's words here, Castle was up from the 4 spot all the way up to number 1. It says Castle's role and opportunities might change with the arrival of Fox, but the fact is he's still in San Antonio. Windhorse in the Hoop Collective podcast typified assessed reaction around the league. My God, these Spurs got De'Aaron Fox and didn't give up Stephon Castle. He had a 33-point game after Fox arrived off the bench. The guy is an outstanding player. He's a two-way player. Big, strong, will do everything you ask for him without complaint. And it was funny to me that whenever he insisted he was a point guard, people called that complaining. But if you watched any of his film from his college days at UConn, not one time did that guy ever complain. Not one time. What are your thoughts on Stephon Castle? And do you think he's justified at being at the number 1 spot?
I do. Over the last month, 14 games, he's averaging 18 points on 49, 37, 77 shooting splits. And so his shooting, has been better. 4.1 3-point attempts per game on 13.5 field goals. So, again, it was never a crazy diet of his shots that were coming from deep, but at least he's been a little bit more efficient over this most recent stretch, in addition to 77% from the free throw line, roughly. 4 rebounds, 3 assists, 1 steal, He's been awesome. I think you can't say enough now that like he's being able to learn from Chris Paul. He's being able to learn from De'Aaron Fox. And it's not even just that they weren't able to get him in the trade. Sacramento nor Chicago, who was also lumped in the deal, they weren't able to get Devin Vassell. They weren't able to get Keldon Johnson. They weren't able to get Jeremy Sohan. They weren't able to pry
Right.
away any of San Antonio's young pieces. And especially when you have a base foundation of Fox, who's 27 years old, Wemby, and now Castle, like that's a very good base. You have pick flexibility still, even after trading, 4 first-round picks, 1 to Chicago, which was their own pick,
Yeah.
that would have conveyed anyway, and then 3 to Sacramento, even though one of them will become 2 seconds in a couple of years. That, or yeah, one of them will be 2 seconds. You gave up plenty of draft capital, but you still have pick flexibility, and you didn't trade away any of your young players to get De'Aaron Fox. Like that just one is just crazy on the surface, regardless if you want to go there or not. And now Castle has multiple like guys to learn from and pick their brains. Like Fox is a legitimately good point guard. He's maybe not like your stereotypical I'm going to average 10 assists per game guy, but like he's a good decision maker. He's a good playmaker. Like, and
Yeah.
then obviously Chris Paul, who's one of the best point guards of this generation, just for like a pure passing playmaking standpoint. So no, I think him being able to pick those guys' brain and him being able to have those reps, I think will be very important. In addition to what he can do defensively, rebounding, finishing around the rim, finishing, have it like his in between game, and then obviously improving his efficiency from 3-point range. Because I think that is something that I wanted him to improve coming out of UConn, and he's
Yeah.
done. He's done that. Like I know the percentages are still low. I think he's still below 30% for the season, but like
He is.
the recent numbers have suggested over the last month that there has been like he's been more efficient. Now, will that sustain itself? We'll see. We'll see. But he's done a good job with it, I think, so far.
And he's also a good free throw shooter. He shoots 72, 73% from the free throw line, and only going to get better in that area. And he's streaky with his 3-point shooting. So the games he hits threes, he's shooting like 60 some odd percent from three, but they don't have these games where he only takes 1 or 2 threes and he doesn't make any. And you're like, oh, that tanks his numbers. And that's what ends up happening. But the fact that you get a guy that's 6'6", that physical, can guard the best player on the court night in and night out, and be interchangeable in the future with De'Aaron Fox, where you can have Fox bringing the ball up, or you can have Castle bringing the ball up, on ball, off ball. And Fox is a much better facilitator than people give him credit for. He averages 6 assists per game. It's not like he doesn't facilitate. So he's really lightning quick. There's more defensive chops to be had with Fox, and I think a Fox Castle backcourt in the future is just going to be dynamic, and it's going to be a bear to deal with when you pair that all with Victor Wembanyama. So there are some guys that did not make the list, and you wanted to point one out specifically. So who got snubbed?
Matas Buzelis from Chicago.
That's the guy.
He was someone who I was expecting to be like toward the back end of this list. But like he's been awesome lately. Like he's been the thing that I worried about with him coming out of the G League Ignite was his shooting. He was an inconsistent shooter.
He was bad. He wasn't
even though like
bad.
There was some defensive stuff that I liked. There was obviously his athletic traits, the size, the physical tools that he had was something that I did like a lot. But it was just like, okay, is he going to be able to develop that kind of shot? I think he's done like he's shown tangible growth in that area. In addition to like Chicago's a very weird roster right now. Like they have like 6 legitimate like guards, point guards, however you want to have it. With like Kobe, Lonzo, Dosunmu.
Kobe.
You go on down the line. Like they have like Trey Jones was someone they got in the Fox deal. He's there now. Like they have a lot of like point guards, and they didn't consolidate Vucevic the deadline, but like they've been seemingly leaning into Buzelis and his skill set a lot lately, and that's something like I've been genuinely like whenever I watch Chicago, he's been like one of the most impactful, if not the most impactful player on their team when he's on the court.
No,
Um,
I agree with you.
he's been awesome.
Yeah, he's been absolutely outstanding. One thing that I can foresee that's going to be a bigger part of his game in the second half of the year, and as you move into his sophomore season, is he's going to draw a ton of fouls because he's physically gifted.
Yeah.
He's plays very hard, attacks the rack. His handle is getting better. His 3-point shot's getting better. He's shooting about 36% from three on the year. But he only averages 1.1 free throw per game. But in the last 5 games, he had 4 attempts, 9 attempts, but then he didn't get any attempts and then 2 attempts. So I think as he figures out how to get to the foul line consistently, his game's just going to grow and grow and grow. But let's transition to NCAA hoops real quick. We're going to wrap it up with that. I know you had somebody you were dying to get to, and you had a question for me. Who did you want to talk about for the college basketball hoops as I'm traveling around the country?
Well, the player that I'm going to talk about kind of goes hand in hand with the question that I want to ask you. But first, let me get to the player.
Okay.
One player that I watched, who I know, if you listen, Ethan Skolnick, Adele, and myself, we went on Five on the Floor to talk about the 2025 NBA draft in relation to the Miami Heat. So please go check that out after you're done listening to this. But one player that I did mention, like, because Ethan asked, well, one player to keep an eye on. One player I did mention at the end was Lee McNeely. I did watch his game against St. John's. Wasn't an efficient game. He missed I think the previous 8 games with an ankle injury. He hadn't played since New Year's Day. He played last Friday against St. John's, who, just to contextualize who St. John's is, they're one of the best defensive teams in the country. They've only lost, I think they're 20-3, 21-3. They beat
Extremely well coached.
Yeah. I'm not a big Patino guy in general, but yes, they are very well coached. He only he started very slow. I thought he was moving pretty well. But he finished 4 of 15 to the floor. He did get to the free throw line 10 times, made 8 of them. Finished with 18 points, 11 rebounds, 1 steal. But the more that I watch McNeely, I'm not saying I'm like I think he should be like a top 10 guy or something. I'm coming around him as being like I see what he can kind of be. The one player that he reminds me of, and I'm trying not to sound like a homer, that he reminds me of just as like a base level player is Duncan Robinson. I don't think he's going to be the shooter that Duncan is. Obviously, Duncan, for people who don't know Duncan, he's one of the best 3-point shooters in the entire league. He's the best 3-point shooter in Miami Heat history. And so like he's been the fastest to 200 threes, 300 threes, 400 threes. Like you go on down the line of players that
You're
like
breaking
NBA
up
players.
quite a bit. You're breaking up quite a bit.
I am. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, it balanced out. You got that helicopter syndrome from Alex Toledo.
Oh man, who gave me Alex's internet?
Yeah, how did you get Alex's internet? But I can pick up where you're taking off. But Leon McNeely, you think he has a baseline of like a Duncan Robinson archetype, where he's a connector, he can attack closeouts, he can shoot the ball on the move, that sort of player. My thing is Duncan went undrafted because he wasn't that coming out of college. Duncan was a standstill shooter his entire career, really. A lot of that stuff he worked at in the Heat system, like really added that to his game. It was his internal drive that really allowed him to become that. So if you're saying Liam McNeely has a lot of those tools now, I mean, then you're right. He could end up being a functional NBA player in a connector role on a team for sure. But what was your question about Liam McNeely in that regard?
Well, my question is not just with McNeely, but it's with I'm picking up a trend with some
Okay.
players. I just want to get your thoughts on this. And I'm just going to list a few players who have this trend. I'm sure after a few players you'll see what I'm picking up on. And this goes along with McNeely too. I won't mention him, but this is something that he does have.
Okay.
Jaeger Demeen, Jeremiah Fears, Asa Newell, Phylon, Ian Jackson. Like guys who aren't particularly physical.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously there's varying degrees with it. And the question I had for you is like, all of these guys that I just listed are freshmen.
Right.
Do you think this is something like, I think because not all of these players have it, like guys like Yakachonis doesn't have, like they don't have this flaw, this deficiency. Thomas Sorber doesn't have this flaw or deficiency.
He does not. Yeah,
like
he does not.
There's a few guys who have this kind of this flaw in their game, and it's not something that they won't be able to overcome. But like, do you think guys with these types of play styles, like, do you think it's just because they're freshmen and then they're young? Is it like, what do you think that it, like, I know it's different for every player, but like, do you think it's something to do with that? Because it's like, I look at all of these, this is a very, for just the people, this is a very freshman heavy class. Like this is a very good underclassman draft. This isn't a good upperclassman draft because the highest upperclassman that you could potentially point to being a top pick
Cam
is
Jones?
a guy that Adele and I aren't a fan of. It's Murray Boyles.
Oh, Murray Boyles, yeah.
Outside of the international guys, is Murray. I don't even want to say because he's technically a sophomore, so maybe that's wrong. But like the other guy would be like Cam Jones, who's going to be
Cam Jones
by the time draft night comes around. Like that's more of a legitimate upperclassman than Boyle. So I beg your pardon there, but like you get what I mean. Like, do you think this is like with them being freshmen? Do you think this is something that each of these guys will be able to overcome?
Well, I wouldn't say each of them. So you can't say each of them because, like you said, everybody's different. I think it is a trait freshmen share. For example, most freshmen share because like Trey Johnson's been okay with getting his shot off against physicality the entire season. He's been scoring 20 points a game, stepped on the freaking court. My thing is that Sorber learned how to use his physicality. He learned how to use his strength. Because early in the season, you thought he wasn't physical, remember? But it was because he just didn't know how to use it.
Yeah.
And so you have some players that are small, they're going to learn to adapt. Like Fears, even though he's listed at 6'4", I don't know if he's really 6'4", but he's only 180 pounds. Like Trey Johnson's 184 pounds, and he gets his shot off through contact better than Fears.
Yeah.
They're the same weight. It's just, one, your measurables, two, your mentality. Trey Johnson has a work physical mentality. Someone like Asa Newell, he didn't really know how to use his athleticism early in the season. You could see where he didn't really know when to use it, when not to use it. Now you see him, like there would be times in a game with Asa Newell, you'd see him get the ball in the post, not know when to go, not know where to attack the defense, but then you'd see these pops of athleticism where he dunk on somebody. Yeah. And now you see him doing it all the time. He's just learning. It's something you got to learn to get around. Not every player learns how to get around that.
Yeah.
Not every player learns how to overcome that challenge. What I'm more concerned about with these guards is their lack of three-point shooting. A lot of these guards can't shoot the three ball well.
Yeah.
Phylon, Fears, not Trey Johnson. He's a bucket. Demeen, Nolan Traore. Those guys just don't shoot the three ball well. So I'm a little concerned with that. Now, can that be overcome also? Yes, it definitely can. It wouldn't preclude me from taking one of these guards because you can work on that. You can fix that. Drew Smith for the Miami Heat's a great example of that. He was a terrible three-point shooter. They worked him into a functional three-point shooter. So if you can get a guy that can defend, that he has a physical frame, you can still draft a guy like that. So they can overcome it. And this is the other thing. Players get better as the season goes on. So what happens in the conference tournament and in the NCAA tournament, it's going to tell you a lot more about their evolution of how they're going to evolve whenever the chips are down and they're playing better competition. A guy like BJ Edgecombe, he's super physical, and he's a freshman. But he's also a freak athlete. Colin Knippel's super physical. Yep. People I guarantee people aren't going to say he is. I mean, there's obvious reasons for that, but he is a super physical prospect.
He is.
That kid's a brick wall. You run into him, he's a freaking brick wall. So I don't think it's a thing that all freshmen share, and I don't think it's something. I just think it's something most freshmen start out with. They need to learn how to play the more physical brand of ball, and they need to put on pounds and weight and get in the weight room. So it can be overcome. It can be overcome. Will all of them overcome it? Like the Rob Dillingham thing. He was cut, but he was historically small. He weighed like 160 pounds. You can see it in the NBA. He's having trouble scoring on the inside against physicality, but he's found ways around it. His efficiency numbers have been good this season. His 3-point percentage is up. His field goal percentage is up, but he can't stay on the floor because he can't guard anybody. But yeah, so there are ways around it, even if you don't yourself end up being super physical.
Because I was just like, that feels like a very, I mean, we've seen it in years past with certain freshmen. It feels like a very freshman-y thing. And again, not everyone will actually overcome it, but I just wanted to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It's a great question. Like, look at
because it is a trend that will affect evaluations for certain teams.
Yes. And look at Stephon Castle. When his first couple of games, I was scouting. Who was I scouting? I was scouting someone else. Wasn't even scouting Castle. In that game, I didn't even really realize. Oh, Kadari Richmond. Kadari Richmond ate Stephon Castle up the first time they met. Kadari's a physical, smart, he's experienced too, and he tore Stephon Castle up the first time they met. Next time they met, completely different story. He was used to the physicality. He brought his own physicality, and he shut Kadari down. So these guys just got to get experience, man. The big thing is experience. And the way you evaluate it is how do they play the second time around? How do they play the next time against a physical guy? So you got to really, that's how I read those evaluations.
Right. And then if this is something that I would imagine that would persist, like if they're in the combine, how do they do with it?
Yes.
You're obviously operating on, you're in a bigger court with more space. You're in obviously a pressure packed environment where you have plenty of eyeballs watching you, not just scouts, not just executives, but all of us. And so, yeah, it's just, and then obviously, certain players in certain organizations, like, again, I don't want to to our own horn here, but like the Miami Heat, for example, Khalil Ware was someone who wasn't super, I mean, obviously it's something that he's still adjusting to, and he's picking up on slowly but surely. There's still some, stuff to pick on with his strength. And as we talked about before, like him.
Your internet's breaking up again, dude.
Okay.
Helicopter's back. We're getting raided by the police. Helicopters everywhere.
No, it's something that like Khalil will have to focus on. But like they've obviously worked a lot with his strength, and like you can see he's much stronger than he was even during summer league. And so that's certain organizations, not they don't prioritize that, but that's something that they will work on a lot, like the Heat do.
No, you're 100% right about that.
So, no, I just wanted to pick your brain on that because, like, with Liam, there were a couple times where, I was looking at his finishing numbers. He's not finishing particularly well at the rim. I think he's a smart player, but there's some stuff that he will have to overcome to be like a legit rotation player or justify himself being a lottery pick in this draft, which like some of the stuff that I've seen in his recent games, recent clips, he didn't have an assist in this game, but like, him putting the ball on the deck as a secondary decision maker and making good decisions. Like that's something that like I didn't see at the beginning of the year that he's doing now. In addition,
you're right about that.
Him coming off of screens and him, the one thing though I also want to see from him is like this was especially pertinent in the St. John's game where I'm sure it's a byproduct of St. John's defense and how like good they are, but like a lot of it was him going east-west and not north-south in previous games, like the Gonzaga
Right.
tape that I watched. He was going a little bit more north-south. He was getting dudes on his hip, and he was making, like, sound decisions out of those reads. But, like, when you're going up against more physical team, not that Gonzaga's not a physical team, but St. John's is, like, one of the best defensive teams in the country. As you continue to go up against these very physical teams who are gonna be, physical, like, are you gonna be able to get to your north-south off the dribble? Like,
Right.
what like, those are the stuff that I'm looking for from him, especially since,
And it's a
he's
lack
coming
of
off
foot
an ankle.
speed too.
Yeah, it's foot like, he doesn't necessarily have the foot speed. Like, that's something that I also have a question with. Like, I
Right.
think he's a good team defender. I think there's team defensive principles that he has, and, like, something, Dan has instilled in him over the course of the season. But how does that one of my bigger questions is, how does that fare up against NBA level athletes? And that's just something that
That's
will
the
have to
key
be answered
point
over
there.
time.
That's the key point there. How is that going to translate to the NBA? And not just that, where are you going to value that on your board? Now, a winning team is going to value that more than a rebuilding team. You know what I mean? Like if you're looking for one of those glue guy connector guys, he could end up being a good pick that's going to help your team win games, come in off the bench. But how high are you going to draft that guy? You're going to draft him 13th overall, or you're going to draft him at the end of the first round or the beginning of the second? Like that's the question you're going to have to ask yourself. And then when we stack rank these guys, that's how we weed all that out.
Right.
But one thing I got to put together my Excel sheet. I'm going to start doing that, and I want to come up with a metric for each guy and see what we can come up with. I'll tell you about it sometime off air, and we'll discuss a little bit later, and we'll try to see if we can have that done by the end of the season, and see if we can give ratings, and we'll have our own ratings for these guys. But for me, that is it. Matt, tell the people where they can find you, follow you, get more of your work.
You can find me at NPH_824_ on Twitter. You can find me at a bunch of different places: VendettaSportsMedia.com, MountainWestConnection.com, HotOutHoops.com. I know I said that all very fast. In addition to playback.tv/5RSN. Also, please go check out playback.tv/hoops profile, which we are on right now.
Absolutely. And you can find me, I'm Digital Adele. You can find me anywhere social media is found, and podcasts are found under Hoops Profile. This is going to go up tomorrow. It'll also be on the 5 Reasons Sports Network sometime at the end of February on the 5RSN NBA feed. I appreciate everybody that stopped by and listened to us and is going to listen to us in the future. I'll see you next time.